In the dusty heart of Ouagadougou, something dangerous was stirring in the shadows. A deadly plot was taking shape, a plan to eliminate the very man who had vowed to free Burkina Faso from foreign control and corruption, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Just months after rising to power, Traoré had become a symbol of hope, especially for the youth. He stood tall against the grip of France and the United States, refusing to bow to their influence. But not everyone welcomed his defiance. Behind closed doors, a group of discontented soldiers had begun to meet in secret, their voices bitter, their ambitions darker. They claimed Traoré was reckless. What they truly meant was that he threatened foreign interests and the profits that came with them. Sources say these traitors had been contacted by outside forces, believed to be linked to Western agents. The offer? Wealth, power, a fast track to leadership, if they could take him out. The plan was cold and calculated. Wait until Traoré's next trip north to meet his commanders, ambush him on the road, blame it on terrorists, and seize control of the government. But they didn't know they were already being watched. Unbeknownst to them, Traoré had quietly built a new intelligence network, a team not loyal to money, but to the soil of Burkina Faso. These agents had been listening, watching, tracing phone calls, and following the flow of money. Day by day, they tightened the noose. As the conspirators sharpened their knives, Traoré stayed silent, ready to strike when the moment was right. That night, Ouagadougou was unusually quiet. Inside a hidden corner of the military barracks, the plotters gathered one last time. Faces tense, whispers low, they went over the plan. They had the weapons. They had the uniforms. They had the timing. Most importantly, they thought no one knew. But someone did. Traoré's intelligence unit had eyes on everything. One of his loyal soldiers had infiltrated the group, feeding back information, the codes, the meeting places, even the exact time of the planned assassination. Hours before the traitors could make their move, Traoré gave the signal. In a coordinated operation, loyalist forces locked down the city. Barracks were surrounded, weapons caches uncovered, checkpoints sealed. One by one, the conspirators were captured. Some had foreign cash stuffed in their bags. Others held encrypted messages from unknown numbers. One carried a French-made radio tuned to a secret frequency. When asked who sent them, most kept quiet. But one cracked. He whispered, "They said if it failed, they'd protect us, but it didn't just fail. It collapsed." Traoré didn't address the nation right away. He let the silence speak. The people had no idea what had happened that night, but they would soon find out. As dawn broke over Ouagadougou, rumors exploded. Soldiers had been arrested. Something big had gone down. Then the trucks came. Crowds gathered as dozens of captured soldiers were marched out in chains. No masks, no hoods. Faces fully visible. Some were familiar. Commanders. Decorated. Officers. Men who once gave orders in the name of the state. Now they knelt in the burning sun, surrounded by armed guards. And then President Ibrahim Traoré appeared. Calm, controlled, but burning with a quiet rage. Behind him, the national flag rippled in the wind. He spoke with no notes. "No teleprompter." "These men," he said, gesturing to the soldiers at his feet, "are not heroes. They are not patriots. They are traitors." The crowd stirred. Some gasped, others wept. A few shouted, "Down with the traitors!" Traoré walked among the kneeling men. He stopped before one, a former classmate from military school. Even you," he said softly. The soldier couldn't lift his head. Then Traoré turned back to the crowd. "They took money from the enemies of Africa, from foreign powers who still believe we are for sale. They think we are their property," President Ibrahim Traoré declared, his voice cutting through the still air. "But we are not. We are free people now." For a heartbeat there was silence, then an eruption. Cheers thundered through the crowd, drums rolled, voices shouted his name. Some wept, tears of anger and pride mingling on their cheeks. This wasn't just a parade. It was a declaration. To the traitors, to their foreign sponsors, and to the world, Burkina Faso would not fall. The dust had barely settled on the streets of Ouagadougou after the public humiliation of the captured soldiers, traitors kneeling under the relentless sun, their faces exposed to the judgment of the people and to the unflinching stare of Traoré himself. But what stunned the nation even more wasn't just the betrayal. It was who was behind it. This wasn't just a group of ambitious soldiers hungry for power. It wasn't just about greed or personal vendettas. This was something deeper, darker. This was foreign. Traoré's security team had scoured every device seized from the conspirators, phones, laptops, and encrypted messages. What they found was explosive. There were emails written in perfect French and polished English, far too refined for local military use. Some were traced back to private security firms based in Europe. Others included chilling phrases like, "Ensure the asset is removed before Q4. Priority, neutralize northern visit. Funds approved for secondary team. Avoid exposure." These weren't the words of rogue soldiers. These were the fingerprints of covert operations, the language of intelligence agencies and espionage. The money? It flowed from Western banks. One officer had over $50,000 in crisp foreign currency, US dollars and euros. Another had been in regular contact with a supposed humanitarian worker who turned out to be using a number registered to a diplomatic facility in West Africa. But why? Why would France or the United States want Ibrahim Traoré gone? The answer was clear to anyone who had been paying attention. Since taking office, Traoré had done what few African leaders dared. He cut the strings. He expelled French troops. He shut down foreign mining operations draining Burkina Faso's gold and lithium. He rejected Western aid loaded with hidden conditions. He strengthened ties with Pan-African allies and began working with non-Western partners in Asia and in the Middle East. And most of all, he made it clear, Africa will no longer kneel. Not to France, not to America. We are no one's colony. That terrified the West, because Burkina Faso, though small, was becoming an example, one that could inspire others: Mali, Niger, Guinea, even East Africa. A new wave of leadership, not born of coups but of courage, of sovereignty, of silence shattered by vision. That's when the whispers began. Journalists received strange calls. Western media labeled Traoré a young dictator. International NGOs began expressing concern for democracy. And behind the scenes, a plan was forming the sleeper cells, the coup. It didn't start overnight. It began with quiet visits. Foreign consultants arrived under the guise of security talks. Then came the military training, supposedly for counterterrorism. But the real lessons weren't about fighting insurgents. They were about taking buildings, controlling communications, and neutralizing high-value targets. Some of the traitors had just returned from training missions in Europe and the US. Others were flown to coastal African cities for conferences where they met privately with foreign diplomats. And the weapons? They didn't come through airports. They arrived by road, smuggled in with humanitarian convoys. Guns with no serials. Ammunition coated in foreign military markings. And the final piece? Money. Promises, visas, bribes were wired to foreign accounts. Some soldiers were told their families would be flown to safety if the coup failed. One was promised a cabinet position, Minister of Defense, after the takeover. But Traoré didn't flinch. He let them move. Let them plan. Let the foreign spies believe Burkina Faso was asleep. All the while, his loyalists were documenting every step, building a case, laying a trap. And when it was time to strike, it wasn't just to stop a coup. It was to expose the truth, to show the people and the world that the real enemy wasn't just hiding in barracks or back rooms. It was sitting in offices in Paris, Washington, and Brussels, masked in diplomacy, cloaked in aid, whispering of democracy while fueling destruction. But now those whispers had become screams, dragged into the daylight not by war, but by the will of a people and the vision of a soldier who refused to kneel. The coup had failed. The traitors were captured, unmasked, and paraded before the nation, and the hands that pulled their strings, named, shamed, exposed. But for President Ibrahim Traoré, this was not a moment of celebration. It was a moment of awakening, not just for Burkina Faso, but for all of Africa. 2 days passed after the parade. Traoré spoke not a word. But the streets remained calm, not in fear, but in anticipation. Tension gripped the air. Some feared another strike. Others waited for retaliation from foreign embassies. International media outlets painted him as a paranoid strongman, a rising military dictator, a threat to democracy. But inside Burkina Faso, something very different was unfolding. A fire had been lit. Across the country, a wave of energy swept the streets. Youth marched with flags raised high. Murals of Traoré appeared overnight, often alongside the face of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary hero of the past. Women sang songs of resistance. Elders spoke of a hope they hadn't felt since the first days of independence. Some feared another strike. Others waited for retaliation from foreign embassies. International media outlets painted him as a paranoid strongman, a rising military dictator, a threat to democracy. But inside Burkina Faso, something very different was unfolding. A fire had been lit. Across the country, a wave of energy swept the streets. Youth marched with flags raised high. Murals of Traoré appeared overnight, often alongside the face of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary hero of the past. Women sang songs of resistance. Elders spoke of a hope they hadn't felt since the first days of independence. Then, on the third evening after the coup attempt, President Ibrahim Traoré addressed the nation. He didn't stand behind bulletproof glass or on a marble stage. He stood on dusty ground in the middle of a packed crowd. No suit, no podium. Just him, a soldier, a son of the soil, and his words struck like thunder. To my people of Burkina Faso, you have seen what they tried to do. You have seen how your own brothers were turned into tools by those who have always sought to own us, but we are not theirs. Not anymore. He paused. The silence was electric. Then he continued. They sent money. They sent weapons. They sent promises of visas, of power, of protection. But what they don't understand is this. Burkina Faso is not for sale. Our land is not for sale. Our blood is not for sale, and our future will never belong to outsiders again. The crowd roared, fists in the air. But Traoré wasn't finished. His tone shifted, stronger, deeper. His voice seemed to stretch beyond Burkina Faso, across borders and languages. A message not just to his people, but to the entire continent, to my brothers and sisters in Mali, in Niger, in Congo, in Sudan, in Senegal. They will come for you too. If you stand up, they will try to break you. If you raise your head, they will try to cut it. They will send agents, preachers, peacekeepers, investors, but their goal is always the same. Control. He raised his hand high, but now we see them clearly. The time of fear is over. The time of kneeling is over. This is the generation of freedom. And to every young African, I say this. Do not be afraid. Build your nations. Protect your people. And when they come, with bribes, bombs, and lies, stand firm. Stand like the baobab tree rooted in your land. That night, his government made sweeping declarations. Zero tolerance for foreign military presence. Immediate expulsion of NGOs caught funding destabilization. Complete national control over gold, lithium, oil, and other resources. No deals with foreign partners who don't respect sovereignty. Then came an unexpected move. A nationwide history campaign. Every Burkina-based citizen would receive a short booklet, a people's history of colonialism, foreign interference, and the struggle for independence. A mental liberation to match the political one. Western governments panicked. France denied involvement. The US gave vague statements. Some called for sanctions. Others warned of instability. But across the Sahel, something had already begun to shift. In Mali, people held solidarity marches. In Niger, youth demanded a purge of foreign-backed officials. In Guinea, Traoré's speech spread like wildfire, shared, quoted, remixed. He was no longer just a president. He had become a symbol, a young African leader, unbought and unbowed, who stood tall and won. As the sun dipped below the horizon that evening, Traoré gave his final words to the crowd. They tried to kill me, but I survived. Not because I am special, but because I walk with the people. And as long as I walk with you, no foreign bullet, no paid traitor, no Western empire can bring me down. Long live Burkina Faso. Long live a free Africa. The earth seemed to shake